In Nazi Germany, the SS were known for their brutal tactics. But what many didn't know was that they had a secret weapon that caused all the violence in them. In the early days of World War II, meth was handed out to soldiers, making them stay awake for days. But what started as a way to boost performance soon turned into a dangerous addiction. By the end of the war, the drug had stripped them of their humanity, turning them into merciless killers. It all started in the late 1930s, when a drug called Pervitin was developed by the Temmler Pharmaceutical Company in Berlin. Pervitin was a type of methamphetamine, a strong stimulant that worked directly on the brain. It made people feel wide awake, full of energy, and more confident. The drug gave users a strong boost in both mental and physical performance. They could stay up late, work long hours, and feel less tired or hungry. At first, Pervitin was seen as a modern solution to everyday life. It was sold over the counter in German pharmacies just like aspirin or cough drops. People didn't need a prescription to buy it. Ads for the drug even appeared in magazines and newspapers, describing it as a pick-me-up that could help with stress, low energy, or sadness. It quickly became popular among college students, factory workers, nurses, and even housewives who wanted to get through their busy days. In some cities, Pervitin was available in small boxes that looked like candy or mints. Some companies even put it into chocolates. One brand, called Hildebrand's Pervitin Chocolates, was marketed to women to help them stay slim and cheerful. It was socially acceptable, cheap, and easy to find. No one really thought about the side effects, yet. But everything would change when World War II broke out in 1939. The German military saw huge potential in this drug. Army doctors and Nazi scientists believed that Pervitin could be the secret weapon to make soldiers stronger and tougher. They thought it would allow troops to march longer, fight without sleep, and ignore fear or pain. Soon, military doctors started testing Pervitin on soldiers. Reports showed that the drug worked exactly as hoped. Soldiers who took it could stay awake for 2 or 3 days straight and keep moving. They didn't feel hunger, cold, or weakness. They felt brave and unstoppable. After that, the German army began ordering millions of pills and handing them out in large numbers. It wasn't just regular soldiers who got them. The SS members also began using Pervitin heavily. The SS, short for Schutzstaffel, was not a regular military group. It started as a small unit to protect Adolf Hitler, but it grew into one of the most powerful and feared parts of the Nazi regime. The man in charge of the SS was Heinrich Himmler, who believed in creating a group of men who were not only loyal to Hitler, but completely devoted to Nazi ideology. They were trained to follow orders without hesitation, even if those orders involved killing innocent people. Himmler didn't want just strong or smart soldiers. He wanted completely obedient men who would never question anything, no matter how brutal or cruel it was. That's why he chose strict training, harsh discipline, and full mental control. But training alone wasn't enough. When the war started, SS units were expected to carry out long missions, guard prisoners around the clock, and take part in mass shootings, all without losing focus or showing weakness. The work was not only physically exhausting, but also mentally damaging. This is where methamphetamine, especially in the form of Pervitin, came in. The SS saw it as more of a performance booster. It was a tool to change behavior. The drug made the men feel bold and numb. It took away fear, tiredness, and even guilt. They could go for hours, sometimes even days without sleep. Their minds laser-focused, but their emotions became flat. Meth helped them carry out horrific actions and still function as if nothing had happened. The SS liked how meth made their men more robotic, less likely to think for themselves, and more willing to do terrible things without hesitation. In some cases, meth was even given as part of routine supplies. The soldiers were told it would keep them strong and ready. But the real goal was deeper than just energy. It was about making sure they wouldn't hesitate to shoot, torture, or kill. The invasion of Poland in September 1939 was the first real test of Nazi Germany's military power, and it was also the first time methamphetamine was used on a wide scale during the war. The attack marked the official start of World War II, and the German army wanted to move fast and strike hard. They used a strategy called blitzkrieg, which meant launching quick and overwhelming attacks with tanks, planes, and soldiers all at once. For this to work, the troops had to keep moving without rest. They needed to fight for long hours, march through the night, and stay alert every second. To help make this possible, the German military handed out Pervitin pills in large numbers. Soldiers in both the regular army and the SS were given the drug to keep them awake and focused. They could push their bodies way past normal limits. This drug use had a serious effect on how the invasion played out. SS troops who were already known for being harsh became even more dangerous. They were involved in mass shootings, village burnings, and the execution of civilians, including women and children. Reports from the time showed that many SS members acted cold, aggressive, and cruel in ways that shocked even their own commanders. In May 1940, Nazi Germany launched a massive invasion of France, moving through Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg. Just like in Poland, the Germans used their blitzkrieg tactics. But this time, the scale was even bigger. The army wanted to move quickly and crush French resistance before it had a chance to fight back properly. And to make this happen, the military handed out even more Pervitin. Over 35 million tablets were distributed to troops in just a few weeks. The SS who were involved in direct combat and brutal cleanup operations were given the strongest doses. They were expected to lead attacks, chase down enemies, and show no signs of weakness. Meth created a kind of false energy that allowed the German forces to advance rapidly through French territory, catching the Allies off guard. But there was a dark side that started to show. Many SS soldiers began to show clear signs of addiction. The more they used Pervitin, the more their minds began to change. Some became extremely paranoid, thinking they were being watched or betrayed. Others had hallucinations. Some soldiers broke down completely, unable to sleep or focus even after the fighting ended. Despite these warning signs, Nazi leaders didn't stop the drug use. To them, the short-term benefits were more important than the long-term damage. The SS command focused only on winning. On June 22, 1941, Nazi Germany launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest land invasion in history. Over 3 million German soldiers crossed into the Soviet Union, aiming to crush the Red Army and seize vast amounts of land. But this operation wasn't just about military conquest. It also had a much darker purpose. Alongside the German army came special SS units, including the Einsatzgruppen, whose job was not to fight soldiers, but to kill civilians. The Einsatzgruppen were mobile death squads, made up of SS men, police units, and other Nazi loyalists. They moved quickly from town to town, targeting Jews, communists, Roma, gypsies, and political leaders. These units didn't use gas chambers. Their method was simple and brutal, which was mass shootings. Victims were taken to the edges of towns, into forests or fields, and shot in large groups. Sometimes they were forced to dig their own graves. The killings were done up close, often face to face, and in broad daylight. Between 1941 and 1943, the Einsatzgruppen murdered over 1 million people. The killings were personal and relentless, often carried out for hours or even days at a time. It was mentally and emotionally crushing work, even for hardened SS men. But meth helped fuel this horror. One of the most well-known commanders of these units was Otto Ohlendorf, who led the Einsatzgruppe D. His group operated mainly in Ukraine and southern Russia, where they murdered more than 90,000 people. Ohlendorf later admitted during the Nuremberg trials that his men carried out shootings methodically, sometimes killing entire villages in a single day. His troops were often high on meth, which made them focused and willing to obey even the cruelest orders. Inside Nazi concentration and extermination camps like Auschwitz, Treblinka, and Majdanek, the use of methamphetamine was not limited to the front lines. It played a key role in how SS guards handled their duties inside these horrific places. These camps operated day and night, processing thousands of prisoners daily through forced labor, brutal punishment, and mass executions. The guards were expected to remain active, watchful, and completely obedient around the clock. To meet these demands, many of these guards regularly used Pervitin, which kept them from sleeping and helped them stay sharp during long shifts. But the effects went far beyond simply staying awake. The drug made guards emotionally numb and extremely aggressive. SS men would often beat or shoot prisoners with no warning, no reason, and no remorse. In places like Auschwitz, where over 1.1 million people were murdered, many of the guards were on duty for days at a time without sleep. Some were reported to be active for 48 to 72 hours straight, managing transports, supervising forced labor, and participating in selections, where prisoners were either sent to work or sent to their deaths. There are many survivor testimonies that describe how guards seemed to enjoy inflicting pain. Some forced prisoners to perform humiliating acts. Others gave beatings for the smallest mistakes, sometimes just for amusement. Victims were slapped, kicked, whipped, or shot on the spot. These acts were not always part of official orders. Often they came from the guards' own decisions. Now, as the war went on, many SS guards became dependent on meth. It became a part of their daily lives, and without it, they would suffer withdrawal, including deep exhaustion, depression, and anxiety. But instead of addressing these problems, camp supervisors continued to supply the drug. By 1942, the Nazi regime had grown more interested in creating a new kind of soldier, one who wouldn't need rest, wouldn't feel pain, and wouldn't question orders. To reach this goal, Nazi doctors began developing experimental drugs that combined several powerful chemicals. One of the most dangerous of these was called D9. The drug was a mix of methamphetamine, cocaine, and oxycodone, each one a powerful stimulant or painkiller on its own. Together, they created a drug that pushed the human body far past its natural limits. The SS chose Sachsenhausen concentration camp located near Berlin as the site for early tests of D9. Prisoners in the camp were seen as perfect test subjects because they were completely under SS control. They had no rights, no protection, and no way to refuse. The testing was brutal. Prisoners were given doses of D9 and then forced to march in circles for hours, carrying backpacks that weighed over 20 kilos. These tests weren't short. They often lasted up to 24 hours without stopping. The SS doctors wanted to see how long a person could keep going on the drug before collapsing. They watched the prisoners closely, recording when their legs gave out, when they fainted, or when they died from total exhaustion or heart failure. The results were used to decide how to improve the drug and how it might be used in combat. The doctors didn't see the prisoners as people. To them, they were just tools to test limits, human lab rats in an experiment to build a super soldier. Many of the prisoners who took part in the tests died during the trials or shortly afterwards. Those who survived were often left severely injured or mentally broken. Meth wasn't just used by foot soldiers or guards. It reached all the way to the top of Nazi leadership. Heinrich Himmler was a strong believer in the power of drugs to shape the perfect Nazi warrior. He supported meth use not only to keep his men awake, but also to make them more aggressive, more obedient, and less emotional. Himmler was very involved in medical programs and gave direct approval to many experiments and drug distribution plans. He worked closely with Nazi doctors to ensure a steady supply of Pervitin for the SS. Another key figure in the use of meth at the top levels of the Nazi state was Dr. Theodor Morell, who served as Adolf Hitler's personal physician. Morell gave Hitler dozens of different drugs over the years, often multiple times per day. Records from Morell's own notes show that some of these drugs included stimulants and opioids, and methamphetamine was among them. Although it's still debated among historians, many believe Hitler was regularly taking meth in the last 2 years of the war, especially as his health and mental state began to decline. In December 1944, as Germany was being pushed back on all fronts, Hitler ordered one last massive offensive in the West. The goal was to break through Allied lines in Belgium's Ardennes forest, split the American and the British forces, and force a peace deal. The surprise attack became known as the Battle of the Bulge, and it involved over 400,000 German troops, including a large number from elite SS Panzer divisions. Facing bitter cold, poor supplies, and long nights without sleep, SS units once again turned to Pervitin. They needed it to march through snow-covered terrain, operate in freezing weather, and stay alert during constant fighting. The drug helped numb the cold and gave the illusion of strength and energy, even when soldiers hadn't eaten or slept properly in days. During this battle, one of the worst crimes of the war occurred: the Malmedy Massacre. On December 17, 1944, members of the 1st SS Panzer Division, Leibstandarte, SS Adolf Hitler, captured a group of American soldiers near the town of Malmedy. Instead of taking them as prisoners, the SS troops lined up 84 of them in a snowy field and executed them at close range. The Malmedy killings weren't the only war crimes during the Battle of the Bulge. Civilians were also targeted, especially in small Belgian villages. By the beginning of 1945, the SS and the rest of the Nazi military machine were falling apart. The war had dragged on longer than expected, supplies were running low, and Germany was losing on all fronts. Many SS troops were now entirely dependent on meth just to function. Soldiers who had taken Pervitin regularly for months or even years were now dealing with the long-term effects. Insomnia and violent outbursts became common. Some SS members were reported to scream at nothing, aim their weapons at fellow soldiers, or wander away from their posts in a daze. In some units, breakdowns became so common that officers had to rotate soldiers more frequently or keep them under close watch. Physically, these men were falling apart. Weight loss, shaking hands, rotting teeth, and heart problems were seen in many of the addicted SS. Meth had worn down their bodies to the point of collapse. Some soldiers begged for more pills just to avoid the pain of withdrawal. Others were caught stealing meth from supply depots or hoarding it during missions. When Allied troops began capturing German soldiers in early 1945, they found pockets filled with Pervitin tablets. Some SS prisoners were in such bad shape that they couldn't even speak clearly or stand straight. Without the drug, their minds and bodies were broken. After the war, the world turned its attention to justice. In 1946, the Nuremberg trials began, bringing top Nazi officials, including SS leaders, to court for war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. While many tried to defend their actions by blaming their superiors, some tried a different excuse. They pointed to drug use, especially meth. Some former SS officers claimed that they had been under the influence of drugs when they committed atrocities. They argued that meth use had clouded their judgment and made them act without thinking. However, the evidence presented at the trials showed that meth was not an accident. It had been part of Nazi military planning from the start. Between 1939 and 1945, the German military ordered and used over 200 million Pervitin tablets. Doctors, military leaders, and Nazi officials all knew what Pervitin did. The judges at Nuremberg didn't accept drug use as an excuse. The planning, the orders, and the actions were all deliberate. The responsibility stayed with the men who chose to commit those acts. Long after the war ended, new discoveries continued to reveal just how deep the Nazi drug program went. For many years, the details of SS drug use were buried in military archives. But starting in the 2000s, researchers began to uncover more records. In 2016, a group of German historians and scientists gained access to detailed medical files from former SS units and camp staff. What they found confirmed long-held suspicions. SS guards at camps like Dachau, Buchenwald, Ravensbrück, and Flossenburg were given meth far more often than soldiers. The scariest part is that many of these men weren't monsters before the war. They were normal people. But meth, mixed with Nazi propaganda, turned them into something else entirely. They became part of a system that committed genocide.